The wolf pack gathers March 15, 1943, 56 setting 35 degree Dalov, mid-Atlantic. The North Atlantic heaves beneath a leaden sky. Waves 20 feet high march in endless procession, their crests torn white by a wind that cuts like broken glass. U-6064 rises through the swell, seawater cascading off her hull as Captain Lieutenant Adolf Greif sweeps the horizon with his Zeiss binoculars. Nothing, just the iron-grey expanse stretching to every compass point, empty as the moon. Greif lowers the binoculars and grins. Out here, 1,500 miles from any shore, they are invisible, invincible. The Atlantic is simply too vast for the enemy to patrol effectively. British destroyers cluster around their convoys like nervous sheep, while Admiral Dönitz's wolf packs roam free across an ocean bigger than all of Europe. Funkram reports signal from BDU, Herr Kalau. The watch officer calls up through the hatch. The radio man's voice crackles over the intercom moments later, reading the encoded message. Greif listens as the coordinates come through. Convoy HX-229, eastbound from New York. 43 merchant ships. Intelligence suggests minimal escort. They are not alone in these waters. U-91, U-228, U-406, and 9 others are converging on the same hunting ground. Greif descends into the control room, ducking through the circular hatch. The submarine's interior reeks of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of condensation that drips constantly from every surface. Men in grease-stained coveralls crowd the narrow passageways. The radio man hunches over his equipment in the tiny Funkraum, transcribing another message. Every few hours, U-6064 surfaces just long enough to transmit position reports to U-boat headquarters in Lorient. Brief bursts of coded Morse, then back beneath the waves. The system has worked flawlessly for years. German naval intelligence assures them that British direction-finding equipment is primitive, unreliable, accurate only to within 100 miles at best. And even if the enemy could narrow it down, what then? By the time any aircraft or escort vessel reaches the transmission point, the U-boat will have submerged and moved 15 miles in any direction. Finding a submarine in the Atlantic, the instructors at submarine school had laughed, is like finding a specific fish in the ocean. Impossible. Greif checks the charts spread across the navigation table. Red grease pencil marks show the estimated convoy route. His boat and 11 others are strung across 300 miles of ocean, forming a picket line the convoy must cross. When contact is made, the entire pack will converge, attacking from multiple directions under cover of darkness. The British call it the wolf pack tactic. Dönitz calls it victory. What Greif doesn't know, what none of the U-boat commanders know, is that every time they transmit, invisible fingers are already closing around them. The listeners, March 15, 1943. 2:47 p.m. RAF Wick, Scotland. The room is windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent tubes that hum like wasps. 20 women in Royal Navy uniform sit at wooden desks arranged in precise rows, each one wearing heavy headphones, each one listening to the Atlantic's secret voice. The devices before them look deceptively simple. Black boxes with dials, cathode ray tubes that glow green in the dim light, and rotating aerials that probe the electromagnetic spectrum with mechanical precision. Section Officer Margaret Henley removes one earphone and writes rapidly on the notepad before her. The signal came through at 14:42 hours, a burst of Morse code on 4680 kilocycles, lasting 17 seconds. Her equipment, an HF-DF set, high-frequency direction finding, pronounced Huff-Duff by everyone who uses it, has captured not just the message, but something far more valuable, the direction from which it originated. She reads the bearing aloud. 092 degrees, strong signal, bearing steady. The plotting officer marks it on the massive wall chart, a line extending southwest from Wick into the Atlantic. By itself, meaningless. But Section Officer Henley's report is already being telephoned to Western Approach's command in Liverpool, where it will meet reports from other stations. At the same moment, in Iceland, able seaman Robert Price is marking an identical signal. His bearing, 147 degrees. In Newfoundland, operators at the Canadian station log the same transmission on bearing 273. 3 lines drawn from 3 widely separated points, converging on a single spot in the mid-Atlantic. The mathematics are simple, the geometry is perfect. Somewhere at 52 degrees TN, 35-47W, a U-boat has just announced its exact position to anyone listening. The entire process, from transmission to triangulated fix, takes 4 minutes. Commander Peter Gretton stands before the plot in Western Approach's command's operations room and watches the enemy appear like ghosts materializing in daylight. 12 U-boats, 13, 14. Each one precisely located, each one updated every time they transmit to headquarters. The Germans still believe radio silence is a tactical option, something to be employed when necessary and abandoned when coordination demands it. They don't understand that silence is their only defense. The moment they speak, they die. Gretton reaches for the telephone. HMS Volunteer and 5 destroyers are steaming 200 miles northeast of the U-boat concentration. They can be repositioned. Maritime patrol aircraft from Iceland can be airborne in 30 minutes. The escort carriers, those precious few that exist, can launch fighters to sweep the area. The Atlantic, the Germans believe, is too big. They're about to learn otherwise. Invisible Chains, March 16th, 1943. Dawn. Aboard HMS Volunteer, Lieutenant David Walsh grips the HF-DF console as Volunteer punches through another wave, seawater exploding against the bridge windows. The destroyer is a town-class veteran of 3 years' hard war, her paint blistered by salt and sun, her crew exhausted but grimly professional. Mounted just aft of the bridge, the rotating aerial of the shipboard direction finding set scans endlessly, listening. The technology that transformed naval warfare lives in a box no larger than a suitcase. Inside, radio waves picked up by the aerial are amplified, filtered, and displayed on a cathode ray tube as bright green spikes. The operator rotates the aerial manually, watching the display. When the signal reaches maximum strength, the aerial points directly at the transmitter. Read the compass bearing. Mark it on the chart. Simple. Walsh's headphones crackle. Morse code, fast and professional, the signature rhythm of a German naval operator. His fingers fly across the tuning dials, sharpening the signal. The bearing indicator settles at 237 degrees. Bridge, HFDF contact, bearing 237 strong signal, classified U-boat. Commander Gretton's voice comes back immediately through the voice pipe. Very good. Prepare to alter course. Volunteer heels into a turn, her turbine screaming as she accelerates to 30 knots. The bearing changes slowly. Good. That means they're closing. Walsh keeps his eyes locked on the scope, waiting for the next transmission. U-boats communicate in patterns. Weather reports at dawn. Position updates every 4 hours. Contact reports the moment they spot a convoy. Each transmission is a death sentence they write themselves. 3 minutes later, another burst. Bearing 241 degrees now, stronger. Walsh can hear the tension in the operator's Morse, short, clipped signals, probably sighting the convoy. The German is sending encrypted coordinates, reporting fat merchantmen steaming eastward, unaware that his own coordinates are being plotted with far greater precision than the ones he's transmitting. The plot officer marks the new bearing. 2 lines now, crossing at 52 degree 47 N, 34 degree 12 W. Range, 48 miles. Gretton studies the chart, calculating. At 30 knots, Volunteer will reach that position in 90 minutes. Too slow. The U-boat will submerge and scatter. But 300 miles ahead, escort carrier HMS Biter is launching Swordfish aircraft. The biplanes are slow, obsolete, armed with depth charges that rarely sink anything. But they don't need to sink the U-boats. They just need to keep them down. Blind and slow, while the destroyers race into position. Walsh lights a cigarette with shaking hands. 2 years ago, finding a U-boat was pure luck. Random searches across millions of square miles of empty ocean. Now they hunt with mathematical precision. The Germans still don't understand. Their operational doctrine, perfected in 1940 when they nearly starved Britain into submission, assumed radio communications were safe because direction-finding technology was primitive. British equipment could barely determine whether a signal came from north or south of the receiver, let alone provide accurate bearings. But that was 1940. This is 1943. Everything has changed. The British networked their HFDF stations, built better receivers, trained operators to logarithmic precision. They mounted the equipment on ships, creating a mobile web that moves with the convoys. They shared information instantly by telephone and radio, combining bearings from multiple sources to produce fixes accurate within 5 miles. And they did it all in secret, carefully concealing the capability even from their own merchant crews, lest word reach German intelligence. The hunters have become the hunted, and they don't even know it yet. The Net Titans, March 16, 1943, 11:20 a.m., U-384, North Atlantic. Oberleutnant zur See, Hans-Achim von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski, doesn't like the silence. For 6 hours, nothing. No signals from headquarters, no contact reports from the other boats in the patrol line. Just the rhythmic ping of the ASDIC set and the creak of the hull as U-384 rolls in the swell. Periscope depth, he orders. The boat rises slowly, the deck tilting upward. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski peers through the attack periscope, scanning 360 degrees, empty horizon, grey sky meeting grey water. He's about to order a dive when the lookout shouts, "Aircraft!" Bearing 040, range 4,000 meters. The Swordfish appears like something from another era, a fabric-covered biplane that looks incapable of threatening anyone. But von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski has seen what those antiquated aircraft can do. Alarm! Dive! 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 The klaxon screams. Men sprint through the boat, spinning valve wheels, pulling levers. The vents open and seawater roars into the ballast tanks. U-384 tilts forward, sliding beneath the waves as the Swordfish roars overhead. The depth charges come 30 seconds later, 4 explosions that lift the submarine bodily, slamming every man against the nearest bulkhead. Lights shatter. The compass gimbal breaks free. Seawater sprays from a dozen stress fractures in the pressure hull. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski picks himself off the deck, tasting blood. Damage report! The boat survives, but they're trapped. The aircraft circles overhead, dropping a smoke float to mark their position. Within the hour, destroyers will arrive. The U-boat can't outrun them submerged, and surfacing means instant death. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski doesn't understand how they were found. U-384 transmitted only once this morning, a 30-second weather report. The British couldn't possibly have triangulated that fast, not accurately enough to vector an aircraft directly onto their position. It's impossible. The Atlantic is too big, but the depth charges keep falling. The pressure hull groans under the repeated concussions. Rivets pop free, pinging off bulkheads like rifle shots. The stern planes jam at 15 degrees down angle. The boat settles deeper, past 200 meters, past test depth, into the zone where the ocean's weight can crush steel like tinfoil. The chief engineer reports through the chaos. All compartments report flooding. Bilge pumps can't keep up. We're getting heavier. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski makes the calculation every U-boat commander dreads. Stay down and die slowly as the boat exceeds crush depth. Surface and die quickly under the aircraft's guns and depth charges. Either way, they're dead. He chooses quickly. Surface, emergency blow. All hands prepare to abandon ship. Compressed air screams into the ballast tanks. U-384 claws upward, breaking surface in a fountain of spray. The Swordfish banks immediately, lining up for another attack. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski orders the deck gun manned, but it's futile. The biplane drops 2 more depth charges alongside the wallowing submarine. The explosions rupture the remaining watertight integrity. U-384 settles by the stern, her bow rising at an increasingly steep angle. Abandon ship! Abandon ship! 47 men make it into the water. The Swordfish circles, marking their position with smoke floats. A destroyer arrives 3 hours later and pulls 32 survivors from the Atlantic. 15 men die of hypothermia before rescue arrives. Von Rosenberg-Gruszczynski, wrapped in blankets aboard HMS Hesperus, asks his captors how they found him so quickly. The British officers smile, but say nothing. The HFDF secret remains protected. The Germans must continue believing their communications are secure. The Bletchley Connection, April 22, 1943. Bletchley Park, England. The codebreakers work in silence, broken only by the clatter of typewriters and the mechanical clicking of the bombs. Electromechanical computers that test thousands of Enigma settings per hour. Hut 8 smells of stale tea and cigarette smoke, its windows painted black against German bombers that haven't come in months. Joan Clark examines the decrypt that's just emerged from the processing chain. German naval enigma, the most difficult variant to break, cracked through a combination of captured codebooks, mathematical brilliance, and the kind of exhaustive persistence that borders on obsession. The message is routine. A weather report from U-1662 in Grid Square, BE 4521. By itself, meaningless. But Clark doesn't work in isolation. She walks the decrypt to the submarine tracking room, where Commander Roger Wynne maintains a plot of every known U-boat position in the Atlantic. Wynne is a slight man with a pronounced limp, rejected for sea duty but possessing something more valuable than physical strength, a mind that sees patterns invisible to others. Another weather report, Clark says, sliding the paper across his desk. U-662 transmitted at 0640 this morning. Wynne marks it on the chart with a blue pin. Then he reaches for another file, the HFDF log from the same time period. 3 stations caught the transmission. Triangulated position, 49°18 N, 28°43W. The decrypt's grid reference translates to 49°20 N, 28°40W. The 2 positions agree within 2 miles. This is the secret marriage that's killing the U-boats. Bletchley Park provides the strategic intelligence, patrol areas, operational orders, rendezvous coordinates. HFDF provides tactical, real-time positions accurate enough to vector aircraft and escorts onto specific targets. Together, they create a surveillance net so comprehensive that German submarines can no longer hide even in the ocean's vastness. Wynne picks up the telephone and connects to Western Approaches Command. U-662 confirmed in BE 4521. Suggest rerouting convoy ON 178 40 miles north. Also recommend Air Patrol Sector Charlie 7, priority immediate. He rattles off coordinates, timings, optimal search patterns. The information flows into the operational machine that protects Britain's lifeline. What the Germans don't realize is that every aspect of their U-boat operations has been compromised. The British know the patrol sectors before the U-boats reach them. They know the planned concentration areas. They know which boats are low on fuel, which have mechanical problems, which commanders are aggressive, and which are cautious. And every time a U-boat transmits, to report contact, to request instructions, to send the mandatory weather observations, HFDF fixes, pin them to the chart like butterflies in a killing jar. The technology itself isn't particularly sophisticated. Radio direction finding has existed since the 1920s. What changed was the systematic application, the network of stations, the trained operators, the rapid communications that allowed bearings from multiple sources to be combined within minutes, the integration with intelligence from other sources. The British built a system. The Germans, supremely confident in their technological superiority, never imagined such coordination was possible. Alan Turing walks past Clark's desk, lost in thought as usual, probably working through some complex mathematical problem. His contributions to breaking Enigma have been invaluable, But even Turing's brilliance would be insufficient without the HFDF network providing confirmation and real-time tracking. The two systems, code breaking and direction finding, validate each other, creating a feedback loop that grows stronger with each decrypt, each bearing, each confirmed kill. Black May approaches May 1st, 1943. U-boat headquarters, Lorient, France. The operations room feels like a morgue. Red pins marking lost boats cluster across the Atlantic chart. April's losses were catastrophic. 15 U-boats that left port and never returned. May has barely begun, and already 3 more are overdue, presumed lost. Captain José Eberhard Gott, Dönitz's chief of staff, studies the patrol reports with growing unease. The pattern is unmistakable. U-boats are being intercepted far from convoy routes, attacked before they can make contact with targets, hunted down with a precision that suggests the British know exactly where every submarine is operating. Perhaps we should implement stricter radio discipline, suggests a junior officer. Limit transmissions to emergency contact reports only. Gott shakes his head. The Wolfpack tactics require coordination. Without regular position reports, the boats cannot concentrate effectively. Besides, our cryptographic experts assure us the enigma cannot be broken. If the British are finding our boats, it must be through some other means. The other means proposed by German intelligence include betrayal by French resistance networks, observing submarine departures and radioing information to London, new British radar capable of detecting surfaced U-boats at impossible ranges, possibly even some exotic detection method based on magnetic anomalies or water disturbances. Every theory is investigated. Every theory fails to explain the observed pattern. What German intelligence cannot accept is the simplest explanation, that British HFDF technology is far more advanced than German assessments suggest, and that the network of stations provides coverage comprehensive enough to track every transmission in real time. The Germans tested their own direction-finding equipment and found it accurate only to within tens of miles, adequate for general searches, but useless for tactical interception. They assume British equipment has similar limitations. They're wrong. British receivers are more sensitive. British operators are better trained. British procedures emphasize rapid reporting and triangulation. And the British have built a network that spans the entire Atlantic, with overlapping coverage that eliminates blind spots. The wall clock shows 1400 hours. In Scotland, Iceland, Newfoundland, and aboard 24 escort vessels scattered across the convoy routes, HFDF operators are logging German transmissions, measuring bearings, calling in positions. The net is active, always listening, always plotting, and the Germans keep talking. The killing ground, May 4th, 1943, Bay of Biscay. Kapitänleutnant Siegfried von Forstner brings U-402 to periscope depth as the last light fades from the western sky. They've been submerged since dawn, crawling through the Bay of Biscay at 4 knots, batteries draining with every mile. The boat stinks of sweat, diesel and fear. 48 days at sea, nothing sunk, and now the desperate run for home through waters that have become a graveyard. Up periscope. Von Forstner scans the horizon. Empty. The sky is darkening, perfect conditions to surface and run on diesels. They need to charge batteries and make speed toward the French coast. Every hour submerged is another hour exposed to British patrols when they finally must surface. Surface the boat. U-402 breaks through in a cascade of white water. Lookouts scramble up the ladder, scanning for aircraft. The diesel engines cough to life, their roar a welcome sound after the electric motors whine. Von Forstner breathes deeply, clearing his lungs of the boat's fetid air. They run surfaced for 30 minutes. The batteries begin to charge. Speed increases to 15 knots. The French coast is 80 miles ahead, safety within reach. Then the lookout's scream cuts through the engine noise. Aircraft, bearing 090, diving! But the Halifax bomber is already too close, dropping from the overcast at 200 feet. Von Forstner has perhaps 20 seconds before the depth charges fall. Not enough time to dive, barely enough time to think. Man the deck guns! Open fire! The gunners scramble up the ladder, traversing the 20mm anti-aircraft guns toward the approaching bomber. They get off perhaps 30 rounds before the Halifax releases its load. 6 depth charges set for shallow detonation, straddling U-402 with mathematical precision. The first explosion lifts the submarine's stern clear of the water. The second ruptures the pressure hull just forward of the engine room. The third and fourth finish the job, breaking the boat's back. U-402 settles rapidly by the stern, seawater pouring through the gaping wounds in her hull. 53 men die in 90 seconds. Von Forstner is not among the bodies recovered. HMS Wren finds 6 survivors 3 hours later, all of them wounded, all of them in shock. They confirm the boat's identity and offer no resistance. The war is over for them. At Western Approaches Command, the loss of U-402 is marked with a black pin on the operations map. The attack was textbook. HFDF fix from shore stations detected U-402's transmission at 1742 hours. Halifax bomber from RAF Saint-Eval was already airborne on patrol, diverted to intercept based on the fix. Time from transmission to attack, 18 minutes. The bomber pilot will receive a commendation. The HFDF operators will never know they participated in the kill. Their work remains classified, secret, even from most of the military. The breaking point, May 24, 1943. Kriegsmarine Headquarters, Berlin. Admiral Karl Dönitz stands before a map that tells a story of catastrophic failure. May 1943 will go into the records as the worst month in U-boat history. 41 submarines lost. 41. Commanders, crews, boats, all gone. The mathematics are brutal. At this rate, the entire U-boat force will be destroyed within 6 months. Hitler paces behind him, demanding explanations. How is this possible? You assured me the wolf packs would strangle Britain, that our submarines were invincible in the open ocean. The enemy has developed new tactics, new technologies, Dönitz says carefully. Their aircraft have improved radar. Their escort carriers provide air cover throughout the convoy routes. They're what? They're what, Admiral? Hitler's voice rises to the edge of hysteria. You are telling me the British have suddenly, miraculously become capable of finding submarines in an ocean that covers half the planet? Dönitz has no good answer. The British haven't miraculously improved. They've systematically applied existing technology in ways German intelligence never anticipated. But he cannot say this to Hitler, who believes absolutely in German technological superiority. I am ordering a temporary withdrawal from the North Atlantic convoy routes, Dönitz says. We will refit the boats with improved anti-aircraft armament, new detection equipment and additional armor. Then we will resume operations. Hitler glares but nods. The withdrawal is approved. For the first time since September 1939, German U-boats will not actively patrol the main convoy routes. The Battle of the Atlantic, the campaign that came closest to winning the war for Germany, is effectively over. Dönitz leaves the meeting and returns to his headquarters. His staff has prepared detailed analyses of the May losses, searching for patterns, seeking explanations. Every theory is examined: betrayal, possible, but unlikely to account for the sheer number of interceptions. Improved radar, certainly a factor, but radar cannot detect submerged submarines. Some new detection method? British scientists would need to have made breakthroughs that German physics says are impossible. The correct answer is staring them in the face, documented in their own signal logs. Every U-boat that transmitted regularly was found and attacked. Every U-boat that maintained strict radio silence survived longer. The correlation is nearly perfect. But accepting this would mean accepting that German communications are compromised, that Enigma is broken, that the entire operational security structure has failed. German pride will not permit this conclusion. Instead, they blame improved British radar, better training, increased escort numbers, introduction of escort carriers, everything except the truth. The HFDF secret remains safe because the Germans refuse to believe it exists. The Widening Net, July 1943, Northwest Atlantic. The U-boat offensive has collapsed, but individual submarines still operate, trying to adapt to the new reality. U-487, a Type 4 T-12 supply submarine, wallows through heavy seas 500 miles south of Greenland. These boats, called Milchkühe, or milk cows by their crews, carry no torpedoes, only fuel, food, spare parts and torpedoes for resupply of attack submarines. They allow the attack boats to stay on station longer, extending their operational range. Korvettenkapitän Helmut Metz knows his boat is a priority target. If the British destroy the supply submarines, the attack boats must return to France after each patrol, reducing time on station by half. He's maintained strict radio silence for 3 days, transmitting only the mandatory position reports required by standing orders. Standing orders, that's the problem. The rigid procedures that served well in 1940 are killing them in 1943. But orders are orders, and German naval discipline is absolute. At precisely 0800 hours, Metz's radioman transmits the daily position report, 6 seconds of encoded Morse, giving U-487's current location to headquarters. In Newfoundland, an HFDF operator notes the transmission. The bearing is logged, telephoned to Halifax, cross-referenced with bearings from Iceland and Greenland. 3 lines converge. U-487 is pinpointed to within 3 miles. A Liberator bomber from Newfoundland is already airborne, flying a standard patrol pattern. The pilot receives new coordinates by radio. Flight Lieutenant Barry Wright banks the Liberator onto the new heading and advances the throttles. His navigator plots the intercept, 40 minutes flying time. The radar operator watches his scope, waiting for the telltale blip that indicates a surface submarine. U-487 runs on the surface, oblivious. Her lookouts scan the empty horizon. The sky is overcast. Visibility perhaps 4 miles. Good conditions for remaining undetected. Metz studies the chart, calculating. Another 6 hours to the rendezvous point, where 2 attack boats are waiting for refueling. Then back to the central Atlantic, where convoys still pass and targets can still be found. The Liberator emerges from a cloud bank 4 miles away. The lookouts shout simultaneously, but there's no time. Wright lines up his approach, releases 6 depth charges from 100 feet. The explosions bracket U-487, rupturing her pressure hull in multiple locations. The submarine settles rapidly, her crew abandoning ship in the final seconds before she slips beneath the waves. 60 men enter the water. The Liberator circles, dropping life rafts, radioing for surface rescue. But the nearest ship is 6 hours away, and the Atlantic is cold. 43 men die of hypothermia before rescue arrives. The destruction of U-487 Strands 2 attack submarines without fuel. They must break off patrol and limp back to France, running submerged most of the way to avoid detection, barely reaching port with empty tanks. The loss of 1 supply boat effectively removes 2 attack boats from operations. The British understand this multiplication effect. Every milk cow sunk reduces German operational capacity far beyond the simple arithmetic of boats destroyed. The HFDF network makes such precision strikes possible. Shore stations track the supply submarines' movements, building a picture of their patrol areas. When they transmit, as regulations require, the coordinates are instantly available to aircraft and surface vessels. The Germans inadvertently mark their own positions with every mandatory signal. The price of victory, December 1943, Liverpool docks. Commander Roger Wynne walks along the crowded waterfront, watching merchant ships unload cargo from America. Food, fuel, steel, rubber, everything Britain needs to survive and fight. 2 years ago, these docks were half empty, waiting for ships that never arrived, torpedoed somewhere in the mid-Atlantic. Now, convoys arrive intact, their escorts reporting U-boat contacts but few successful attacks. The statistics tell the transformation story. In 1942, U-boats sank 6 million tons of Allied shipping. In 1943, that number dropped to 3 million. The monthly totals show an even starker decline. By December, U-boats are sinking fewer ships than the Allied shipyards can build. The tonnage war equation has reversed. Every week, the Allied merchant fleet grows larger while the U-boat force shrinks. Wynne knows the numbers behind the numbers. His submarine tracking room plots every U-boat position, tracks every patrol, predicts every movement. The HFDF network provides real-time updates. Bletchley Park supplies decrypted orders. Together, these sources create a picture so complete that Western Approaches Command sometimes knows more about U-boat dispositions than German headquarters. The victory has come at immense cost. Over 30,000 Allied merchant seamen died in the Atlantic. Thousands more Royal Navy sailors perished aboard escort vessels. The U-boats fought with desperate courage, their crews knowing the odds but pressing attacks anyway. German submarine losses exceed 70%, higher than any other military branch in history. Of 40,000 men who served in U-boats during the war, 30,000 will not survive. But the mathematics have shifted decisively. The convoy system, once barely adequate to protect shipping, now functions with brutal efficiency. Escorts equipped with shipboard HF-DF can detect U-boats attempting to shadow convoys, driving them off before they can coordinate attacks. Aircraft with improved radar and depth charges patrol the convoy routes, keeping submarines submerged and ineffective. The escort carriers provide constant air cover, closing the Atlantic gap where land-based aircraft couldn't reach. And underlying everything, the invisible web of HF-DF stations, listening endlessly, measuring every transmission, plotting every position. The Germans still haven't grasped the full extent of British direction-finding capabilities. Some U-boat commanders maintain radio silence and survive longer. Most follow standard procedures and die within days. Wynne stops at a memorial plaque commemorating merchant seamen lost at sea. The names fill dozens of bronze panels. He thinks about the HF-DF operators, mostly women, mostly young, working 12-hour shifts in windowless rooms, wearing heavy headphones that leave their ears ringing, logging bearings that mean nothing in isolation but become death sentences when combined with others. They'll never receive public recognition. Their work will remain classified for decades. But they've helped win the most important campaign of the war. The Battle of the Atlantic is effectively over. U-boats will continue operating until Germany's surrender, but they'll never again threaten Britain's survival. The supply lines remain open. American troops and equipment pour into Britain, preparing for the invasion of Europe. The war will continue for another year and a half, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. The ocean, that seemed too vast to patrol, has been surveyed, measured, and divided into hunting zones. The submarines that once roamed free now die within hours of transmitting. The technology was never particularly complex, just radio receivers, trained operators, and a telephone network. But applied systematically, integrated with other intelligence sources, supported by effective tactics, it transformed naval warfare. The Final Reckoning, May 8, 1945, surrender. The last U-boat surface in accordance with Allied orders, flying black flags of surrender. Over 100 submarines still at sea when Germany capitulates, most of them young boats with inexperienced crews sent to sea in the final desperate months when the war was already lost. Captain Lieutenant Peter Kremer brings U-333 into Weymouth Harbour, England, watching British sailors line the dock. His crew stands on deck, uncertain whether they'll be treated as prisoners or simply shot as pirates. The war has been over for days, but the knowledge feels unreal. 5 years of combat, 5 patrols survived, and now this, surrender in an enemy port to an enemy who dominated them so completely they never understood how. A British naval officer boards U-333 and requests the boat's log and radio equipment. Creamer hands them over, watching as the Enigma machine is carefully removed and carried away. The British officer seems almost reverent handling it, as though it were a museum piece rather than equipment that failed to protect German communications. "How did you find us so easily?" Cremer asks. "We maintained radio discipline, transmitted only when necessary, changed frequencies according to schedule, yet always your aircraft appeared within hours of any transmission." The British officer smiles slightly. "Direction finding. We could locate any U-boat within minutes of transmission, anywhere in the Atlantic." Cremer shakes his head. "Impossible. Our technical experts assured us your equipment was too primitive for tactical fixes." "Your technical experts," the officer says politely, "were mistaken." The truth will emerge slowly over the following years as documents are declassified and veterans tell their stories. The British HFDF network wasn't a single dramatic breakthrough, but a systematic application of existing technology. Better receivers, better training, better procedures, better coordination. The Germans tested their own equipment and assumed British capabilities were similar. They were wrong. The integration with Bletchley Park's decryption work multiplied the effectiveness. Each source validated the other. Decrypted messages provided strategic intelligence that HFDF fixes, confirmed and refined. Together, they created a surveillance system so comprehensive that U-boats essentially operated under continuous observation. The Germans never adapted because they never understood. Individual commanders who maintained strict radio silence survived longer, but they were written off as lucky or particularly skillful. The overall command structure never connected radio transmissions to detection because their doctrine said such correlation was impossible. By the time the evidence became overwhelming, the battle was already lost.